Welcome to Nerdstalker. I'm here with another lovely interview. This time a repeat offender slash guest here, Jake Stroh. And Jake, if you guys don't remember him before, we interviewed him around January 1, I believe it was, for a Lynda.com title. And Jake, can you tell us, welcome, anyways.
Yes, well, thank you. It's good to be back on. Well, first off, it was great to start off 2014 with you and on the Nerd Stalker, and here we are again. So thanks for having me again.
Oh man, thanks for making time for us. So Jake, for the people that don't know who you are, can you please give us the old spiel? Who is Jake Stroh?
Well, Jake Stroh is a web developer, designer. I run a company called Link Effect. I also teach part-time at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where I teach young talent how to design and code websites and work with motion graphics. And then, of course, as of recent, I am a Lynda.com author.
Yeah, amazing.
So I never sleep.
Yeah. So Jake is here to share with us a brand spanking new title that Lynda has just released, entitled Migrating from Flash to Edge Animate. Can you tell us more?
Absolutely. This title is focused on designers who have utilized Flash in the past. They could have a intermediate to advanced level of knowledge with the software. And this is geared specifically to them in migrating and thinking differently in the world of motion graphics in HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript, so that these projects will work on mobile.
That's awesome, man. So yeah, I'm running through the title. Well, number one, congratulations on this. This looks like a dearth of work here that you. But I mean, look at all this stuff you got in the Y Flash, Y Edge interface and animation workflows, working with text, interactivity with Edge, recreating a Flash project, and it goes on and on here.
Yeah, well, it's a very it's a very different world because you're dealing with, in Flash, of course, everything that you design, all the motion graphics, everything that you put together is compiled then into one file, which is called an SWF or Swift file.
Right.
So everything is compressed into this one file. When you're working with Edge Animate, you're actually creating a website file structure that's utilizing JavaScript and CSS. So it's a whole bunch of different files, but Edge Animate does a really great job of packaging them, but transferring that onto the web, you have to keep everything congruent and in place. So you're working in the web design world, so it's quite a bit different.
That's really impressive, because I think the output files are, as you mentioned, I believe, right? It's HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah, there's a number of different JavaScript files that come along with it when you create a new workspace. And also, once you start importing images into the library, it'll automatically create an images folder inside of your website file structure as well, which is great. So it does a really good job kind of keeping everything contained, but you have to then transfer that in a contained way onto a web server for people to be able to view it.
Right, and so you can use this in a number of different formats then. If it's web friendly, obviously any mobile or obviously browser based type of thing, but I also have heard that you can use this for sort of like EPUB kind of stuff, right? As well.
Excuse me. Yeah, you could definitely use it for a type of EPUB, although really InDesign has a lot of that already built into it, and Adobe has had those features available for years. So there's a whole EPUB track with InDesign. One of the really great uses, though, for Edge Animate is for prototyping mobile apps. Because you're dealing with touch and gestures, and you can put that in there, and if you have a knowledge of JavaScript, you can certainly add a lot more functionality into your projects. And for me, who I'm not an app programmer, but I am a front-end programmer and designer, it's really great to take an app and demonstrate transitions and interactions and that sort of stuff before handing it off to a app developer.
So can you talk about the title itself, the focus of the migration for traditional Flash developers, designers to this new tool. How did you sort of address that bridge?
Oh, sure. Well, Lynda.com, they produce a number of titles that are migrating from one thing to another.
Right.
So for me, I've been a Flash developer for 14 years. And
So you know your action script then, right?
oh yeah, and I never use it now.
Oh God.
almost never.
Brutal.
Yeah, well, but the syntax is so close to JavaScript, so that's kind of nice. I mean, as I started delving into JavaScript more and more, it's still a very familiar place, so that's nice. But for me, I just sat down and when I started to create the outline for the course, I thought about, okay, what is somebody like me going to want to know when they first open the program? Because there's a lot of similarities. It is an Adobe product, so the user interface of the program itself has a lot of similarities between Flash and After Effects as well. And so if you do have a background in one or both, it's definitely an advantage, but there are a lot of things that look as if they're going to behave the way they do in Flash, and they don't. Or they do, but it requires a slightly different workflow. And so this course, for me, the hardest part about producing this course was what did we have to leave on the cutting room floor? Because I could go on and on and on and on and on about things that are what I think important. So we stuck with just the really crucial, most popular type of workflows that a Flash developer and how a Flash developer and designer would think, and utilizing that with Edge Animate.
That's really interesting because all these content creators, and I'm considering this also content creation too, that I've talked to, they always tell me about just the amount of like editing they've done, cutting out things that have been left on the cutting room floor, as you say.
Yeah, yeah. Because I'm so close to the subject matter for myself, that was really the most difficult part. I'd love to do like a sequel or something along those lines of here's the other stuff that we weren't able to do, but you still have to kind of keep it within the confines of a certain amount of time, and to Lynda.com does an incredible job working with their authors in making sure that there is a really natural flow to the course, so that it's really logical and easy for the users to go through for their clientele base subscribers. And so I needed that. I definitely, if I were producing this on my own, the course would have been like 2 days long, or whatever. I mean, it would have been really long.
Right.
And who's going to want to watch that? Or where are you going to start? Even if you have really well titled chapters and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that'd be really hard to digest for sure. Yeah.
So
where do you see this then in terms of obviously the title is a migration type of focus from one tool to another. Would you see this as sort of an intro, a beginner's, like a moderate or advanced, or?
I would say beginner, intermediate. It's definitely geared towards someone who maybe has opened up the program, played around with it a little bit. I mean, that's what I did when I first started playing around with Edge Animate. And you run into a few roadblocks and things because you're thinking differently, and your workflow in Flash, while very similar, isn't exactly the same, especially on certain types of things. Working with symbols, working with buttons is completely different. The fact that we have now access to web fonts inside, because you are dealing essentially with HTML5, so which is great, but that's a whole workflow that never existed before. We just had our fonts, we could embed them into our project, and that's why the revolution of Flash in the early 2000s was what it was. Graphic designers loved it because they could use whatever font they wanted.
So is it safe to assume there's a tight integration with Typekit, since Adobe also owns Typekit
Absolutely.
as well?
Oh yeah, but there's a tight integration with Typekit. You can also use Google Fonts.
Wow.
And I think there's a couple of other ways that you can do it. It does require a little bit more getting into the code,
Mm-hmm.
when you step outside of Typekit to bring those fonts into your project, but it really isn't that hard.
Mm-hmm. So then
And,
this tool is geared for what, the designer then, or a designer and a developer then?
I
Because
would
you
say,
sort of allude to that you can get more advanced with this kind of stuff. So I'm just for
sure,
the person who doesn't know.
absolutely. For designers, I think they'll be just as comfortable as they've always been in Flash. For designers who, here's where the parallel is. For designers who are comfortable or have an intermediate or even a beginning level of ActionScript, can utilize the WYSIWYG code editor, which is going to write a lot of the code for you. But as a beginner would start to look at the syntax, I would think that their natural curiosity would be to take a lynda.com JavaScript course, and you can inject your own JavaScript into or onto any object or aspect of your project, and that's where you can really step outside. Just like in Flash, you can step outside of code snippets and things that are already in the program itself, and have a higher level of interactivity. So that just depends on your skill level and where you want to take it.
Mm-hmm. So can you walk us through, I mean, obviously not the course, but like a high level sort of, the course itself? What can someone expect, basically?
Sure. Well, you can expect that we take it from the ground level, going through the interface. We talk a little bit about the history of Flash, how we've come to where we're at now, and why this is important. And then we get into basic workflows, and then the next thing, once we kind of cover the user interface, basic workflows, working with symbols, bringing images in, manipulating and animating, and basic keyframing, then we get into building like a little interactive slideshow where we create our own buttons with rollover states, and by clicking on them, they fade in. It's very simple, but it is explaining a very important workflow that you can then build on later on in the course.
Of course, yeah.
And
we all need our hello world, right?
We all need our hello world, exactly. And then so as you're going through the chapters, once that mini project is finished, then I go through copy and pasting the code into an existing page. We actually are replacing a Swift file that does the same exact thing. So, which I would think a lot of people who have done, real basic kind of slideshows that haven't maybe used a jQuery plugin or something, but they built things for websites specifically using Flash. My thinking is, hey, here's an opportunity for you to recreate this and plug it into the website, and it has the proper fallback for older browsers, just like we would have a fallback in Flash utilizing Swift Object for people who don't have the Flash plugin. So it's a real direct parallel in that workflow. And then once you go through those chapters, I do touch on video. I mean, video is very important, and integrating video into Edge Animate, which is a completely different world, and I feel that it needed to be addressed in this title because of Flash video started a huge video revolution on the web, and of course we're going to HTML5 video, and anybody who knows about that knows it's codecs, codecs, codecs. It's not just one magical FLV file. It's Bog Orbis, WebM, H.264, and you have to provide all those codecs in order for it to work in this new wonderful world that we're living in here in the mobile.
Wow. So does Edge Animate do a lot of this heavy lifting then?
You mean as far as the code?
Yeah, well, like things like, if I'm gonna expect to export anything that includes video too, you're obviously gonna maybe check some boxes, support like you were mentioning, H2, 264, etc.
Well, it isn't immediately obvious as to how to do that. It's not as intuitive. There are many more steps involved, and there is some copying and pasting. essentially, I mean, if you want to get real technical, you have to kind of create an object that is a container. It's a null object, not like a null object in After Effects, but it's just kind of like an empty container, and give it an instance name and then address it with code. Yeah, so this course would be for the Flash developer who has a background in HTML and CSS. They're going to have an additional leg up. And then, honestly, I don't really know a lot of Flash developers who that don't do HTML and CSS anyway. So
well, this is cool. I mean, our viewers can get a sense that Jake he knows what he's talking about. He knows his stuff here. And so what's really cool is that you can speak to it from like also a beginner's perspective, but I can obviously, dig in a little deeper here. You can hear that Jake has that expertise, the deeper expertise to get dirty when needed.
Dirty when needed. Absolutely. In teaching anything, I always tell my students that you can never go back to the basics enough times, because even when I teach the basics on various different things that I've taught over the years, sometimes one particular day you see it differently and it opens up a door that you didn't even think you needed, and you start seeing different possibilities. So starting at the ground floor and getting to an intermediate level is, I think, where I strive to take most students, and I think Lynda.com as well, before they offer more advanced type of titles, because it's really up to the individual where they want to take it from there. How far do you want to go down this road? Maybe you don't want to use Edge Animate. Maybe you want to use a different type of program that does essentially very similar things, like my other title, Hype.
Hype, yeah.
Which is, a lot of people out there don't like the concept of the Creative Cloud. And so,
well, it's an expense. It's like a monthly, or it could be
payments
annual
for life.
Right.
Yeah, it's payments for the life of your career anyway. I have to do it out of necessity, which is fine. I don't really have a problem with it.
A lot of professional companies and corporations and whatever. I mean, we do it. Yeah.
Sure, but Hype is a $30 program and you own it. And and there's some open source programs out there, not as popular, but essentially.
So for the people who don't know, can you touch on what is Hype?
Oh, sure. Hype is an HTML5 time-based keyframe animation program. You can definitely prototype mobile-type experiences and web experiences utilizing the latest in HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. So it works on desktop and mobile, and it's a very similar product to Edge Animate. And that was my first title with Lynda.com, which was an up-and-running course, up and running with Hype. And that essentially is kind of the up-and-running titles are out of the box. I just opened the program. What do I do?
Gotcha.
And
as opposed to this current title.
Right, where I think this is, somebody who's knowledgeable about Flash, perhaps a little bit more than a beginner, kind of an intermediate. Although I'm sure there are people out there who are new to Flash, and maybe they're just trying out their downloadable Adobe suites and thinking, hey, this doesn't work on a tablet. Although there are some ways, and I do cover that in my Migrating course from Flash to Edge Animate, and that is there are some ways to take Swift files and convert them into an HTML5 canvas experience.
Wow.
So I do touch on that. There are some things that you can do in Flash as Adobe has continued to evolve the Flash product to be able to output things. There are some things you have to change in how you build the file. And then Google also has something called Swiffy, which is an online destination where you can convert a Swift file into an HTML5 experience and then plug that into your website. It's not perfect, but if you were in a jam, and you needed to do something really quick, it does some pretty impressive stuff.
So let's talk about the experience of working with Lynda and getting this course together, and you sort of brainstorming this whole thing, just from your perspective, from the genesis, to sort of what we got today.
Sure. Well, the way that you present an idea to lynda.com is you come up with a proposal and kind of like a really rough table of contents of the key things that you feel are important that you'd want to cover in this course. And then they decide whether or not that is worthy of a title. And definitely, I was surprised actually that somebody hasn't. Well, I guess I wasn't completely surprised because Edge is still very, very new. It was
Yeah, it is. It's relatively newish, but
yeah, but those of us who have been on the bandwagon since the early betas, it's like, wow, it's been out for a couple of years.
yeah, right.
So in our world, it's like, yeah, it's about time that somebody does a Flash to Edge Animate title. So figuring out that was a possibility, I was very excited, and the people at lynda.com were very receptive to the concept of doing this title. And I think, with technology, they want to definitely address those types of things, as quickly as possible. So
that's exciting, man. You
oh
got
yeah,
you got it
and
together, man.
so then you work with a producer, and you start creating, you start taking your outline and you start writing out the different chapters and what it is you want to cover. I also have to build the exercise files. So there again, for me, it was very different than the other course because I spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, what would I want to know as a Flash developer who's looking to migrate over to Edge Animate? Because what am I out of the box going to do? Maybe from a basic level, so that I don't take on too big of a project right away, which was kind of another thing I think in my own mind. I was like, ooh, we could do this whole take this big project in Flash that I've created. I could create this big project and show all the intricacies of rebuilding it and making it behave exactly the same in Edge Animate, and how that's going to integrate onto like a tablet.
Right.
And again, that would have been a really long course. So distilling it down and taking the outline. The outline always kind of changes because even as writing it, sometimes there were things I discovered even when writing it. It's like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. And I had to go into it with a Flash mindset. And so thinking like, okay, I'm thinking with my Flash mind.
Right.
I wonder what would happen if I did this. And so I try it and go, either wow, it works exactly the same, or what, that was very unexpected, and why isn't that doing it? Well, let's find out.
Interesting. Oh, cool.
So that's kind of the fun part of creating a title too. Is you do sometimes, just like in music, when you're rehearsing to go into a recording studio and play a guitar solo or something, you have some happy discoveries along the way.
Right.
And that becomes part of the content.
That's an interesting perspective, though, too, because I mean, there are us old school sort of agency, Flash people.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, and they're probably coming at this, and with the the prior example you gave of what you initially wanted to do, but I mean, obviously. Well, anyways, touch upon that. I mean, obviously, you have to appeal to the masses, and they will go through that process too of thinking in Spanish, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Their type of thing, it's in English or something
It's
like
a different
that.
dialect, yeah. It's a different dialect. Oh, absolutely. Well, for me, I decided to just take some. Before I really got into writing it, I decided to take some projects that I've done. Not really big projects, kind of medium-sized projects, and said, all right, let's see if we can pull this off in Edge Animate. What kind of sacrifices am I going to make versus what kind of benefits am I going to gain by this being an interactive experience that's going to work on a tablet or a phone?
Do you see this as a professional solution for like those professional Flash developers, you know, and those traditional?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to lie. There are certainly limitations,
of course,
with this with this product. But the same limitations are very similar. Limitations apply to the other products like Hype as well, and that's because the limitations are HTML5 and CSS3 and JavaScript, and you know, it's still a language that is a draft. It's being developed and changes, and mobile keeps changing, and we always are kind of chasing the ambulance, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
To kind of keep up with it. So if you're going to go at it from a really advanced standpoint, you're probably going to need somebody who is and really has super chops with JavaScript, who you can work with a high proficiency to take kind of the front end and what you can do with Edge Animate and, you know, bring it to a higher level. So, but I would think that a lot of JavaScript programmers would say, well, why use this tool when we can just design it, build the HTML front end, and just circumvent and get rid of that tool entirely. And so, you know, I think that there is a line in the sand depending on the breadth of the project.
Of course.
Where a tool like this doesn't make sense. But you could say that about any creative tool.
Right. And as you were saying, this could be a very interesting sort of prototyping, quick prototyping tool as well, right?
I think it's a great rapid prototyping tool for mobile types of experiences. At least I see a lot of the possibilities. I've played around with it, and I see a lot of opportunities there. And yeah.
Well, let's continue with this sort of you know, the creation of the course itself, where we were at. You were working with the producer and coming up with the content. Were they shoving you? At what point, once you were recording, was it like done, or did you have to do like retakes, or something like that, and sort of iterate on it?
I mean, yes, it was done, absolutely. But like anything else, you know, if you're a band and you want to make the best use of your studio time and you're all rehearsed and you're ready to go, I mean, you're not going to do it every single time in one take. So as with a record producer, just like a producer at Lynda.com, perhaps there are better ways to articulate things as you're recording it, and of course, just keeping you on track and making sure that the pace of the course isn't too fast, isn't too slow, you know, kind of keeping you in time. So yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, there's a few of the movies where, you know, I probably did. I'm a bit of a freak when it comes to, if I make like one mistake, I'll like scrap it. You know, sometimes, and I know that isn't probably the best thing to do because there's a such thing as editing. So
yeah.
So yeah, there are times where I hold myself to a standard of there is not going to be a mistake in this take.
Right.
And
well, that's good. That's good for the student.
Yeah.
Or the viewer, I should say. Yeah.
Right. But you know, when you think about it, you are talking to a computer screen. You're walking, you know, it's being recorded and you're talking just like we are right now, and you're saying, okay, now we're going to import this image, and sometimes you start thinking about what you're going to say next, and then you kind of get lost.
Oh, yeah, I couldn't imagine.
You're like, okay, what was I, you know, even though I have like bullet points as to how I want to go through it, and you're like, oh.
Because it's kind of like you're talking to yourself in a way, but you can't do it like that.
Yeah. although those of us who have been in front of webcams for
Right.
years,
Yeah, yeah,
you know, I do think that honestly has a big benefit
oh
to
yeah.
when I recorded my first Lynda.com title. I was like, oh, this I can talk to my computer screen. That's cool.
Right, right. So, for some of you may not know, me and Jake have a history online. We were some of the early video astronauts who did a lot of this sort of pre-Skype type of stuff here,
Yeah,
playing around with multimedia.
long before it became in vogue or utilized now every day.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, and so I'm happy about that because getting in front of a webcam and talking is yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It is what it
it's a skill kind of.
it kind of is, or you just kind of get over it.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know, but you know, it's like a recording studio. I mean, you do have like
Well, let's
you
talk
have
about that. Let's talk about all the new. Well, you went to lovely Southern California again to Lynda, right?
yeah, to Carpinteria, California, that where their
Oh,
headquarters are. I love it there.
no kidding. Huh?
Well, I mean, it's a nice little town, and you know, when you've been talking for 8 hours a
Right.
day, it's nice to be in a location that isn't LA. You
You
know,
know, you really speak fond of this place. Last time we spoke, you also, but even more so now, you're like, this place is great, kind of thing. Vibe you
well, it
have.
is.
I
I
mean,
mean, and Santa Barbara is like 25 minutes away
oh
too.
wow, that's a beautiful town. Yeah,
Oh yeah, I love Santa Barbara.
gorgeous. Yeah,
So I mean, if you want to go up there and kind of just see the sights up there, it's not like
yeah.
a major trip. Um, but as far as Carpinteria just kind of being like this sleepy little surfer vacation town, and being there in the off season, um,
Wow, what a
it
dreamy
kind of
place to work.
well, it's not bad, you know. I mean, it's definitely after that you want to have some time to kind of reflect on the day of recording
Mhm,
and maybe to kind of check out a little bit.
mhm.
Another added bonus is there's a microbrewery there that's
Oh
like
wow,
on the beach, and
sweet.
yeah, and you know, I don't know, us Milwaukeeans just seem to intuitively know where it's at, and so no, it's a nice little place. It's called Island Brewery Company or Brewing Company, and I don't know, the people there are real friendly, and
Shout out to Island Brewing Company. Dot
yeah,
com. No,
dot
I don't
com.
know.
And you know, so go out, have a nice dinner, or just have something to eat, and just go chill and have a beer, and then you know, go back to your hotel and start planning for the next day, essentially.
So how did you? It's one thing to be able to like talk to a webcam and deal with a computer and have a light on you. It's another to be in like in a new environment, or actually you'd been there before, so you kind of knew. But a small padded room with a person or two people on the other side of the glass or something like that.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
mean they have these you know the recording studio booths are a nice sized room. I mean you definitely it's a great facility and the people there take really good care of the talent coming in and recording. So it's a fair
Ooh,
sized
talent.
room.
Let's listen to Jake now, Mr. Fancy Talent. Yeah. I'm
Yes.
busting you. Come on.
Yeah, I know you are. That's good. You should. And then yeah, you know, like a recording studio where you might do voiceover work. There's a glass window, and the producer's on the other side, and you know he's there looking at you like
Yeah, yeah,
this.
yeah.
You better do it right. No, it's not like that at all. They're like so supportive, and you definitely need somebody at times to as a sounding board
Oh
to
yeah.
say, you know, how was that? Did it? It seemed like I kind of, you know, it's because sometimes in your own mind you think that really stunk,
Right.
or there was a part where I didn't think it was good, and you know, you go back and you watch that part and you go, oh yeah, it wasn't bad, it wasn't
Yeah.
bad. It was actually good. I'm being really skeptical and I'm not being objective anymore. And that usually tends to happen at the end of the day
Right.
where your voice is starting to kind of go out and you think you're pushing harder to get the same result. Just like in anything else, you kind of get tired and you start thinking, oh, this is no good. And it's still good. Or there's a point where you're like, you know what? It's time to call it a day. Time to pack it up. And they're really good at, for people like ourselves who tend to push ourselves really hard, they're really good at kind of getting into hey, hello, hello. It's time to back off a little bit. Let's chill. It's a good stopping point, you know.
Nice. Yeah.
And you need that. You definitely need that because I don't know about you, but me, when I'm working on something or I'm solving a problem, you know, I'm like a, I don't know, I'm like a, I don't want to use the pit bull analogy. You know, it's like I am not letting go until this is mastered and done.
Yeah. That can be unhealthy too. Yeah.
It certainly can. It certainly can.
Well, speaking of that stuff, then, like, you know, what did you leave out that you wish you could have included that perhaps may not have been suitable for this particular release?
Well, I think that without revealing too much about things that were left out, I think that it would be interesting to have been able to approach actually prototyping a real basic mobile type of app experience. So.
And that is something that someone could, after this, potentially explore, right?
Somebody could explore that, I'm sure.
I mean, there's a lot. I look at the title. I mean, you're talking 2 hours 27 minutes, right?
And that, and
total.
I mean, total, and
that's a lot.
That is a lot, but you look at some of their other titles where they're the essential training titles.
Right.
I mean, some of those, which that's taking you from the basics all the way through a very good working knowledge, like a working knowledge to the point where you're approaching intermediate level. You know, those are like 6 hours long.
I've been through some of those. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I have too.
It's tough. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I'm very much a serial learner. I know that a lot of people use lynda.com in a way that is, they're just looking to do a particular thing, and I do that too. It's very helpful. It's like, I got to do this one thing. And you look through the chapters and you look at it and go, that I need to know.
Yeah.
But when I'm trying to learn a new program or a new aspect of a program, I will watch the entire course from beginning to end in order.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I'll do that, and then I'll come back to it and say, you know what, I need to touch on working with text, customizing textiles, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and you know, everybody's different. So random access learning provides that, which is what's so great about lynda.com. And at the university too, where I teach, all the students now have, as part of being a student there, they have access to their own account on lynda.com. So
that's a bonus.
Some of the things that we're doing there is assigning movies or titles, and hey, watch this before our next class because I'm not going to lecture. I'll answer questions, and then we're just going to move into actually utilizing software around a project. So, which is nice because that's a different experience. It's very one-on-one. And
you learn by doing, right?
You learn by doing, and so, you know, we're going to create such and such a project. I teach a motion graphics class, which centers around After Effects, and you know, they love doing things like we're going to do a title sequence for a movie. You know, usually what I do is I make up the movie, I make up a storyline, the characters, the whole thing, and I want it to be as real life as, because if you do an existing movie, there's too much cultural baggage, especially if they've seen it, and you're going to start seeing things that aren't that original. So, and then I have a music background. I'll just come up with some short little ditty in my recording studio, and there you go. Here's the sound bed. You got 2 minutes or 1 minute and 30. Here are the titles that need to go in. Go crazy, you know. And it's really fun to see what they'll come up with. And so.
So speaking of learning by doing, I mean, you did as you mentioned before, a hype title for Lynda. So that was obviously a learning process for you. What'd you take from that like things you wanted and perhaps you could have improved upon, and feedback also from students or whatever to this particular title or the way you executed this.
The hype title, yeah. Well, hmm, how should I approach that? It's hype is, I think, the user interface. Well, there's one hurdle, and that is it is a Macintosh, Apple only program. So,
Mhm.
but if you're a Macintosh user, the user interface
Mhm.
is very similar to, say, the iWork suite, like
Mhm.
Pages, and so there's that kind of familiarity in user interface that you don't have to overcome.
Mhm.
Um,
But
it,
in terms of actual the the way you executed like this title is what I mean. Like from the hype, through that process and your learning process of I'm creating this outline, I'm recording in the
oh,
studio, with things that perhaps I would have liked to have done better. You know, because I'm one of those people. I learned also by failing a bunch. Really, is what how I do it, and then I just trudge my way through it, and then I become adept at something and do it over and repeat, repeat, repeat. So now you're on to the next project. You know, being this migration title, and you've learned from the hype title.
oh yeah, oh I see what you mean, like the recording process,
Yeah,
the whole
exactly.
process.
The whole shebang. Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay, yeah, absolutely. Well,
And
you
the
know,
feedback from the students as well, who could have said, "Hey, Jake, you went too fast, too slow, whatever." You know.
sure. Well, some of the feedback is, maybe we could have included or addressed JavaScript and injecting JavaScript into projects more in the hype title.
Mhm.
And while that certainly is something that I would have liked to have done, up and running courses,
Right.
you have a little bit more of a limited time frame.
Sure.
It's really just kind of getting you comfortable with the program and using it for what it is.
Hmm.
So um, getting into that might be more of an intermediate. Who
Hmm.
knows? There
Hmm.
have been some updates to the to Hype. Hype now is currently at 2.5, and they do have some really neat scalable features where you can make things that are responsive. And Edge Animate does that as well.
Hmm.
Um, and so there are some things as the product itself, as Hype has continued to evolve. Um, I'm always thinking, that would be a nice addition. So, but yes, getting back to the question, adding maybe just one little tidbit about JavaScript, other than utilizing the WYSIWYG aspect of JavaScript in the program itself.
Hmm.
Something that I would have liked to have done, but it was more of a time constraint,
Sure.
is there is a companion iPad, well, not just iPad and Android Hype app, so that
Hmm.
if you're on the same network, you can send it to a preview on the actual mobile.
Okay. Very
And
cool.
at the time, I felt it was a very relatively new addition,
Hmm.
and well, essentially, yeah, it was really really new, and I didn't feel comfortable approaching that until, I mean, so new that I
Right.
I would have needed a little bit more time to work with it before
Right.
recording, and
So that was just a
so
matter of circumstance and timing, right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
and so, but do I wish it was in the title? Yeah, I do. Of course, I do.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I think any author or anybody who creates content, once it's out there in the world, you're like, oh man, I could have that in there. That would
I'm
have made
sure.
perfect sense, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. You're
Uh,
your worst critic. Yeah, for sure.
but Lynda.com does, as part of their titles, we do update our titles from time to time and add those things. So
Oh, no
that's
kidding.
good.
Huh.
Oh
That's
yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Um, you can go into a lot of titles that change rapidly, and you're seeing this more and more, I think, with the Creative Cloud, especially with this latest 2014 release. I mean, I was just in Edge Animate today, and I'm like, oh, that's a nice change.
Oh, yeah.
kind of changes the workflow a little bit,
Uh-huh.
but that's interesting, and it makes sense. But so you might visit like some of the other Edge Animate titles by Chris Converse, who does a great job,
Hmm.
and the essential training. I think every time that one of these updates comes out, you're going to go to that title and you're going to see this little blue new icon next to certain things within a chapter. Hey,
Oh,
this has
really?
either
Oh,
been
that's the
updated.
indicator. Okay.
Yes, so that's been updated or added. And
Nice.
if you've done any of the Creative Cloud stuff after this major update that came out last week, I think you go back and visit those titles, you're going to see lots of blue little icons that say new next to it,
Oh,
because
awesome.
it's a major. I mean, the latest update for 2014 is a pretty big update. So
Awesome. So when I look at the title, the example is the San Angelico Museum of Contemporary Art.
yeah, Samoka,
Yeah, Samoka. Okay. I'm
Samoka.
like, what is this Samoka? Why isn't this like, Wisconsin or something like that? I see.
Well, I got some Wisconsin in that title. I've
Okay.
got some frozen tundra and some of the Lake Michigan in the wintertime type stuff that
Wow.
I've worked in, and so the content has to be it has to be approved and it has to be original, and
Hmm.
so of course if you probably see a lot of similarities in Samoka or some of these other types of faux commercial clients that are part of the lynda.com library that we can work
Right.
with. You know,
Right.
as far as me, I take a lot of pictures, and so I'm very happy to just kind of, if we're working with images and just trying to make something and just to make a point, it's just easier for me to take a photo that I've never really used for anything other than I just took the photo and, hey, this is kind of interesting. I kind of, us Milwaukeeans, they always say, well, some of the people at Lynda said, wow, you people from Milwaukee, you really like it there, like, why, yeah, I know the winters are hard and all that kind of stuff, but yeah, I want to work in some of the locale a little bit.
Yeah.
That's where I'm
Yeah.
from. I want to, hey, check it out.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
frozen tundra.
Well, you got the 420 viewers in 40 countries, and you got 5 people watching your title right now,
Right now,
Linda.
I love the fact that those stats are up there.
Right there, right? You must.
Yeah.
I know. It's so guilty. You watched that. I can tell. I was looking.
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was watching it. And I'm like, how cool is this? You can see all that.
Oh yeah, yeah. What's interesting is it isn't just privy to like the authors. I mean, you as a user are seeing this happening right now. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of like seeing how many people liked something, or
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure that there's some sort of study that was done
Yeah.
somewhere
Yeah.
about, hey, this is a popular title, I should watch it.
Right. Right. So, Jake, what is like the go forward for you, as much that you can share, whether it's with Linda or personal projects or whatever that you got
Sure.
going on?
Well, right now I'm really working on. Well, I'm always working on a number of different projects with clients, but
Mm.
I'm kind of at a point where I'm kind of looking at relaunching my company
Mm.
and kind of backing away and then putting it back out there in a new light, so to
Hmm.
speak, because I believe that the education aspect of my career path now, not just with lynda.com, but with teaching at a university, along with working with commercial clients, one of the things that I've been experiencing is that there is mutual benefits that go both ways. It's a two-way street,
Hmm.
and it's really caused me to look at how I run my business differently.
Mm.
Um, I get to do a lot of research, and I get to work with people in real time when teaching, even with lynda.com, the feedback that you get.
Yeah.
And with students in a room, you're constantly being challenged by, they see things completely different than you do.
Hmm.
I learn a lot from working with them. I see things differently, and I bring it back to my commercial projects for my clients, and I go, that's an interesting approach. and it makes sense in this particular situation.
Hmm.
And of course, then what I do professionally with my clients and things that I bring to the table when I teach, and the real world aspects of pitfalls and benefits and things that happen along the way when working on a project in various different sizes and scopes.
Hmm.
So I'm looking at ways of integrating the two
Mm-hmm.
into my business model.
That's a huge value add that you bring then. I mean, that must be,
Yeah.
man, you're so busy. You make so much stuff and you're taking in so much stuff. It must, uh, how do you do it, man? I mean, a lot of people, they get, caught up in their own heads, or they don't start, or you know what I mean? So I imagine with someone like you who's got so much stuff going, that means you must have 100 other side ideas that you just is on the someday maybe list or something, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I do try to find time to kind of have my own creative endeavors that have no commercial end other than things that I want to do and put out there in the world.
Mm-hmm.
This last 2014, it's just been impossible
Mm-hmm.
to do that. But um, having done this course, migrating to Edge, coming out of that, I've walked away with a ton of ideas that I want to do for myself, but are also, because I'm going to do these projects for myself, are going to benefit people that I work with, my clients, my students. And so I kind of now I'm kind of in a point where there's certain projects that I want to do for myself that I really need to do in
Mm-hmm.
order to bring a different level of experience to what I'm doing in other arenas.
Mm-hmm. So
So
I'm gonna give you the heady question at this point. Then is like, what would the Jake Stroh now tell that Jake Stroh who is beginning his journey or path to being a teacher and on both the the school level and the Lynda.com online school type of level as well.
um, I would say always embrace change. Always.
Oh, it's-
It's going to continue to change. Once you've mastered something, you're going to have to evolve with that and be open to how something was done a year ago or 6 months ago. There's a better way,
Mhm.
and embracing research on your own. And that is, this isn't going to do what I need it to do. I could just get by and do this,
Mhm.
and I could move on. But if you don't address that, it's going to that particular thing, whatever it is, whatever piece of technology or aspect of the creative workflow that you have hasn't changed over a certain course of time. I guarantee you it will always come to the forefront, and you're going to need to address it. Either you'll be made to, so why not be proactive instead of reactive about it, and constantly embracing that, and just figure out what aspect of the creative, when we're talking about interactive, I'm addressing like content development, video,
Mhm.
audio, web type stuff, and how that all integrates. Figure out what your niche is and just go that way, but yet be open to that could change as well.
Right.
So the bottom line is that we work in a very dynamic medium. You have to be a dynamic thinker and a
Mhm.
dynamic person. That doesn't mean you have to be this boisterous type person, but you have to kind of have random access thinking
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
be open to it. So that would be the advice I would give the.
Great advice, man. That's good. That's great advice. That's great advice. Yeah. Nice thoughts. Well, Jake, man, where can we get more information on you and the titles and what you're working on, et cetera, man?
Sure. Well, I believe in my lower thirds here is my Twitter handle.
Hmm.
Sometimes I do
Down
put
below
some.
there, people.
Yeah, a little thing over there.
Spell it
And
out for the people that aren't watching and just listening,
okay,
please.
right. It's JS11 spelled out JSELEVEN. I do from time to
That's
time
on
post.
Twitter.
That's the Twitter thing.
Hmm.
Yes. I do from time to time post technical findings or articles that I find interesting that are addressing where we're going with, especially HTML5 and motion graphics. And sometimes it's just a lot of blather and whatever I find interesting or whatever. On lynda.com, my author page is lynda.com/Jake Stroh, JakeStroh.
That's right, man. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being on Nerd Stalker. We appreciate your time yet again, and we look forward to speaking to you again in the future, we hope.
Oh, I hope so too, Adolfo. It's been a real pleasure to be on the show with you.
All right. All right, thank you everyone for watching Nerd Stalker. Remember to check us out at Nerd Stalker on Twitter. Check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Nerd Stalker TV. Check us out on iTunes. You can listen to this, watch the video, give us the thumbs up on the YouTube deal and the whole 5 stars on the iTunes deal, and we're all over the place. You guys know that. So we really appreciate your time and look forward to speaking to y'all next time. So long for now.